The night was quiet in the Montana forest. Staff Sergeant Mason Wright sat on his cabin porch looking at the stars. After 15 years in the military, these rare moments of peace were precious to him. His dog, Rex, lay at his feet, half asleep. Suddenly, a bright light streaked across the sky. Mason stood up, watching as the object grew larger. It wasn't a shooting star. It was something else. Something big. The object left a trail of smoke and fire as it fell toward the forest about 2 miles from his cabin. "What on earth?" Mason whispered. The crash shook the ground. Birds flew from trees and Rex started barking. Mason grabbed his jacket, flashlight, and first aid kit. He might be on leave, but his training kicked in. Someone could be hurt. "Stay, Rex," he ordered and set off into the dark forest. It took him 40 minutes to reach the crash site. What he found made him stop in his tracks. This wasn't a plane. It wasn't anything made by humans. The metal shimmered with colors he'd never seen before. Strange symbols covered parts of what looked like a small spacecraft. Mason should call this in. He knew that. His commanding officer would want to know about this right away, but something made him hesitate. He'd seen how the military handled unusual situations. Whatever or whoever was in that ship might not be treated well. As he got closer, he saw a trail of glowing blue liquid leading away from the wreckage. It looked like blood, but no blood he'd ever seen. Carefully, he followed the trail. Behind a fallen tree, he found her. At first glance, she looked almost human, a woman with delicate features. But her skin was a light blue with tiny scales that seemed to shimmer. Where a human would have ears, she had fin-like structures. Gills lined her neck, opening and closing as she struggled to breathe. She was hurt badly. A deep cut ran across her side, leaking the glowing blue liquid. Her eyes fluttered open when Mason approached. They were amazing. Pure silver with no pupils like liquid mercury. The alien woman tried to move away, fear clear on her face. "I won't hurt you," Mason said softly, showing his empty hands. "I want to help." She didn't understand his words, but something in his tone must have reached her. She stopped trying to escape. Instead, she reached for a small device attached to her wrist. Her fingers were long and had thin webbing between them. She pressed something on the device and it projected a hologram. The image showed her ship being attacked by others like her. Mason watched as she was thrown into an escape pod while her ship exploded. She hadn't just crashed, she'd been running from something. Or someone. Mason knew he was making a choice that would change everything. He couldn't leave her here to die. He couldn't turn her over to the military either. Not until he understood more. "I'm going to help you," he said, pointing to her wound and then to his first aid kit. "Then we'll figure the rest out." She watched him with those silver eyes as he cleaned and bandaged her wound as best he could. The cut was deep but had missed anything vital as far as he could tell. Her body was similar to a human's in many ways, yet strangely different in others. When he finished, he gently lifted her. She was lighter than she looked, maybe because her bones seemed different, almost hollow like a bird's. She made a soft chirping sound that might have been pain or surprise. "Sorry," Mason said, "but we need to get you somewhere safe before anyone else finds this crash site." The walk back to his cabin was slow and difficult. Twice they had to hide as vehicles passed on the distant road. By the time they reached his cabin, dawn was breaking. Mason laid the alien woman on his bed and checked her bandages. The blue blood had stopped flowing, which he hoped was a good sign. Rex approached cautiously, sniffing at the strange visitor. To Mason's surprise, the dog didn't bark or growl. Instead, he lay down beside the bed as if standing guard. "Good boy," Mason whispered. The alien woman was watching everything with wide, alert eyes. She touched the soft blanket, ran her fingers over a wooden table, examined the electric lamp with great interest. Despite her injuries, curiosity seemed to overcome her fear. Mason found a notepad and pen. He drew a simple picture of himself, then wrote Mason underneath. He handed it to her. She studied it, then took the pen in her webbed fingers. Beneath his name, she drew strange symbols. Then she pointed to herself and made a sound like water flowing over stones. "I can't say that," Mason admitted. He looked at the window where the constellation Lyra was visible in the morning sky. The alien woman had been looking at those stars earlier with what seemed like longing. "How about I call you Lyra?" he suggested, pointing to the stars and then to her. She followed his gesture, then nodded slowly. She wrote something else in her language, then drew the constellation beside it. She pointed to herself and said Lyra, trying out the human word. Mason smiled. Nice to meet you, Lyra. He didn't know what would happen next. The military would be looking for the crash soon. Lyra's people might come looking for her too. But for now she was safe, and Mason was determined to keep her that way. As the sun rose higher, Mason drew the curtains and made some soup. Lyra watched him work in the kitchen, her silver eyes following his every move. She was getting stronger by the hour. Her wound seemed to heal faster than a human's would. When Mason offered her the soup, she sniffed it carefully before taking a small sip. Her face lit up with pleasure and she drank the rest quickly. "Glad you like it," Mason said with a laugh. Later that day, as Lyra slept, Mason went back to the crash site. He needed to hide any evidence that might lead others to his cabin. To his surprise, much of the ship was gone. Only a small piece of the strange metal remained. Mason picked it up and put it in his pocket. He covered the area with branches and leaves, hiding the scorched ground as best he could. When he returned, Lyra was awake and had found his old star maps. She was marking them with the pen, adding stars that weren't on the human charts. When she saw him, she pointed to a star and then to herself. "That's your home?" Mason asked. Lyra nodded. Then she made a gesture like something exploding and looked sad. "Is that why you're here? Something happened to your home?" She didn't answer, but her silver eyes filled with what looked like tears. They glowed slightly in the dim cabin. Mason sat beside her. "Whatever happened, you're safe here. I promise." Lyra reached out slowly and touched his hand. Her skin was cool and smooth. In that moment, Mason knew he had made the right choice. Whatever she was, wherever she came from, she needed help. And he would give it no matter what came next. A week passed. Lyra grew stronger each day. Her wound was almost healed, leaving only a faint blue line on her side. She learned human things quickly. She could now use the bathroom, turn on lights, and open doors. Mason taught her simple English words by pointing to objects and saying their names. "Water," Mason said, holding up a glass. "Water," Lyra repeated. Her voice had a musical quality, like chimes in the wind. "Good," Mason said with a smile. Lyra worked on her wrist device when Mason wasn't teaching her. She took it apart and put it back together many times. One evening, she made a happy chirping sound and showed Mason what she had done. The device projected images that moved like a movie. Lyra pointed to the images and spoke in her language. Mason watched, trying to understand. He saw Lyra in what looked like a lab. She wore a uniform with special markings. Around her were others of her kind, all working with strange equipment. They seemed to be scientists. The scene changed to show a meeting. One alien, larger than the others with dark blue skin, seemed angry. He pointed at Lyra and at some data on a screen. Lyra stood her ground, shaking her head. "You disagreed with him," Mason guessed. Lyra nodded. She pointed to the data and made a cutting motion across her throat. The data was dangerous? It could hurt people? Another nod. The images continued, showing the large alien ordering Lyra to be taken away. Then the attack on her ship that Mason had seen before. "So you're a scientist who found something dangerous. Your boss wanted to use it to hurt people, but you said no, so they tried to kill you." Lyra touched her device again. The image changed to show Earth, then zoomed in on their location. Then it showed more ships coming toward Earth. Mason felt cold. "They're coming here? Looking for you?" Lyra nodded sadly. She pointed to herself, then made a motion like hiding. "You need to stay hidden," Mason agreed. "How long until they get here?" Lyra held up 3 fingers, then pointed to the moon. 3 moon cycles. 3 months? She nodded. Mason ran his hand through his hair. 3 months wasn't much time. He needed to help Lyra communicate better, and they needed a plan. The next day, Mason brought out an old laptop. He showed Lyra how it worked. She learned to use it in hours, much faster than Mason had expected. He found a children's language program, and Lyra began learning English more seriously. Each night they sat on the porch and looked at the stars. Lyra would point out her home system and tell stories using simple English mixed with gestures. Mason learned that her people were called the Valkyrie. They had been exploring space for thousands of years. "Valkyrie fight," Lyra explained one night, a month after her arrival. Her English was improving daily. "Bad leader want power, want weapon. I find weakness in soldiers. Special soldiers made in lab. Genetically modified soldiers?" Mason asked. "Yes, I find problem in code. Can make them sick. Leader want this to kill enemies." "But you refused." Lyra nodded. "Weapon too dangerous. Could kill all Valkyrie, not just soldiers. I say no, leader angry. Mason understood now. Lyra wasn't just a refugee. She was a whistleblower who had refused to create a biological weapon that could wipe out her entire species. Your leader tried to kill you to keep this secret? Yes, say I die in battle. No one know truth. Mason felt a new respect for Lyra. She had risked everything to do what was right. As Lyra's English improved, so did their friendship. They developed routines. In the morning, they would walk in the forest with Rex. Lyra loved the earth plants and animals. She collected leaves and rocks, studying them with keen interest. In the afternoons, Mason would teach Lyra about human culture while she told him about the Valkyrie. Their civilizations were different in many ways but shared surprising similarities. Valkyrie live long time, Lyra explained. 300 Earth years. We travel space, see many worlds, but we never meet beings like humans before. What do you think of us? Mason asked. Lyra thought for a moment. Humans strange. Short life, but much passion. You feel strongly. Love strongly. Fight strongly, she smiled. I like this. One evening as they sat by the fire, Lyra asked a question that caught Mason off guard. Why you help me? Why not tell your leaders? Mason was quiet for a long time. I've been a soldier for 15 years. I've followed orders, fought in wars. But sometimes the people giving the orders don't have all the answers. Sometimes they make mistakes. He looked at Lyra. If I had reported you, they would have taken you away, studied you, maybe hurt you. I couldn't let that happen. You good man, Mason. I try to be. As the second month began, they started preparing for the possible arrival of the Valkyrie. Mason taught Lyra how to use human weapons just in case. She was a quick learner and had excellent aim. Lyra worked on modifying her wrist device to detect Valkyrie ships. She explained that her people had technology to hide from human radar, but her device could warn them if ships approached. Their days fell into a comfortable pattern. They were no longer just two beings from different worlds thrown together by chance. They were friends, partners in a shared secret. One night, a thunderstorm hit the forest. The loud cracks of thunder made Lyra jump. She explained that on her world, storms were rare and much quieter. Is safe? She asked as lightning flashed outside. We're safe in here, Mason assured her. The cabin has stood through worse storms. Lyra moved closer to him on the couch. On my world, we have story. When sky makes noise, it means spirits talking, old souls speaking to new ones. We have similar stories, Mason said. Some people say thunder is the sound of angels bowling in heaven. Lyra laughed at this image. Her laugh was like music, and Mason found himself smiling whenever he heard it. As the storm raged outside, they shared more stories from their worlds. The differences between them seemed less important than the things they shared. Curiosity, courage, and a sense of right and wrong that crossed the boundaries of species. When Lyra finally fell asleep on the couch, Mason covered her with a blanket. He watched her peaceful face and realized something that both thrilled and terrified him. He was beginning to care for this alien woman in a way he hadn't expected. The thought should have seemed impossible. She was from another world, another species, yet as he watched her sleeping form, illuminated by flashes of lightning, he couldn't deny the truth. Somehow, against all odds, he was falling in love with Lyra. 3 months after Lyra's crash, the alarm on her wrist device went off. The sound woke Mason from a deep sleep. He found Lyra already up, looking at a hologram of Earth's solar system. A small red dot was moving toward Earth. They found me, Lyra said. Her voice was steady, but Mason could see fear in her silver eyes. Are you sure it's them? Mason asked. Yes, Valkyrie scout ship. Small, fast, come to find before main ship. Mason checked his rifle and handgun. How long do we have? 2 days. Maybe 3. They had prepared for this moment, but now that it was here, Mason felt a cold knot of fear in his stomach. Not for himself, but for Lyra. He couldn't bear the thought of her being captured or killed. We need to move, Mason said. I have a friend with a cabin deeper in the mountains. It will be harder for them to track us there. They packed quickly. Food, water, weapons, and the few personal items they couldn't leave behind. Mason left a note for his neighbor who checked on the cabin sometimes, saying he was going on a hunting trip. As they drove away in Mason's old truck, Lyra looked back at the cabin. It had been her first home on Earth, her sanctuary. Now they were running again. The drive to the mountain cabin took 5 hours on rough roads. The cabin belonged to Mason's army buddy who had died in combat 3 years ago. Few people knew it existed. which made it perfect for hiding. The cabin was smaller than Mason's, just one room with a fireplace and basic supplies. It was dusty from disuse, but it would serve their purpose. They set up Lyra's detection equipment right away. The red dot was still approaching, but slower now, as if searching. "They looking for signal," Lyra explained. "My blood has trace element. They can track from space, but need to be close. Will they find us here? Maybe, need to prepare." For the next 2 days, they set traps around the cabin. Lyra used her knowledge of Valkyrie technology to create alarms that would warn them of approach. Mason used his military training to prepare defensive positions. At night, they sat close by the fire, speaking little. The threat hanging over them had changed things. Words that had gone unsaid now seemed urgent. "If they find us," Lyra said softly, "you should run. This not your fight." Mason took her hand. Her skin was cool against his. "I'm not going anywhere. We face this together." Lyra's silver eyes seemed to glow in the firelight. "Why you risk life for me?" Mason looked at their joined hands, 5 human fingers interlaced with 5 webbed Valkyrie ones. So different, yet fitting together perfectly. "Because I care about you," he said simply. "More than I should, maybe. More than makes sense." Lyra touched his face with her free hand. "I care too. Never thought possible. Human and Valkyrie." Their moment was interrupted by a sharp beeping from Lyra's device. She checked it and her face grew serious. "They hear. In atmosphere. 3 hunters." Mason grabbed his rifle. "How long?" "Hour, maybe less." They moved quickly, taking positions in the trees around the cabin. The plan was to ambush the hunters before they could call for backup. The night was clear and cold. Stars filled the sky, the same stars that had brought Lyra to him. Mason checked his weapon and waited. Lyra was 30 feet away, hidden in the shadows of a large pine. Her night vision was better than his. She would see the hunters first. The forest was silent except for the occasional hoot of an owl. Then Mason heard it, a soft hissing sound like air escaping from a tire. It was getting closer. Lyra made a bird call, their signal. The hunters were approaching from the east. Mason raised his rifle and watched. They appeared like ghosts, 3 tall figures moving through the trees. They looked similar to Lyra but larger with darker blue skin. They wore what looked like armor and carried weapons that glowed with a faint blue light. Mason took aim at the lead hunter. The plan was for him to take out the first one, Lyra the second, and then both of them would focus on the third. He steadied his breathing, finger on the trigger. The hunter was almost in the perfect position. Just as Mason was about to fire, Rex barked. The dog had followed them from the cabin, somehow tracking them through the mountains. The sound alerted the hunters, who immediately took cover. "Down," Mason shouted as blue energy blasts hit the tree above him. The fight was fast and chaotic. Mason fired at the hunters, forcing them to keep their heads down. Lyra moved like a shadow through the trees, using a modified human pistol that she had enhanced with Valkyrie technology. One hunter fell to Mason's rifle. Another was hit by Lyra but managed to retreat into the forest. The third hunter, the largest, circled behind Mason. Before Mason could turn, the hunter fired. The energy blast hit a tree next to Mason, sending splinters flying into his arm. He dropped his rifle, pain shooting through him. The hunter approached, weapon raised for a killing shot. Mason reached for his handgun, knowing he would be too slow. Suddenly, Lyra was there. She leaped from a tree branch, landing on the hunter's back. They fell to the ground, struggling fiercely. The hunter was stronger, but Lyra was quicker. She pressed her wrist device against the hunter's neck and activated it. There was a flash of blue light, and the hunter went still. "Mason!" Lyra ran to him, checking his wounded arm. "How bad?" "I'll live," Mason said through gritted teeth. "We need to move." "The other one got away." "No," Lyra said. "I hit him with poison dart. Special formula I make. He sleep for days." Mason looked at the fallen hunters. "You didn't kill them?" "No need, better they live. Tell others I dangerous. Make them afraid." Despite the pain, Mason smiled. Even in battle, Lyra showed mercy. It was one of the many things he admired about her. They returned to the cabin to treat Mason's wound. The splinters had cut deep, but nothing was broken. Lyra used a combination of human first aid and Valkyrie healing techniques. "They find us once, they find again," Lyra said as she wrapped Mason's arm. "Need better plan?" "I know someone who might help," Mason said. "My old squadmate, Heather. She works at a space monitoring station now. If more Valkyrie ships are coming, she might be able to see them." Can you trust her? Mason thought about it. I think so. We've been through a lot together. But we don't tell her everything right away, just enough to get her help. The next morning, Mason called Heather from a secure line he'd set up. He kept the conversation vague, asking about any unusual readings in the upper atmosphere. Heather was suspicious but agreed to look into it. What's this really about, Mason? She asked before hanging up. I can't say over the phone, but it's important, Heather. Lives are at stake. There was a pause. Come to the station. Bring whatever it is you're not telling me. I'll give you 10 minutes. After the call, Mason and Lyra discussed their options. Going to the monitoring station was risky. Lyra would be exposed, but they needed information about the Valkyrie fleet. I go with you, Lyra said firmly. No more hiding. Time to fight. Mason looked at her with admiration. Despite everything she had been through, she was still brave, still willing to stand up for what was right. Together, then, he agreed. That night, as they prepared for the journey, Mason found Lyra looking at the stars from the cabin porch. Her silver eyes reflected the starlight, making them seem even more otherworldly. Missing home? Mason asked, joining her. Yes and no. Miss my work. My friends. But not miss war. Not miss leaders who want only power. She looked at Mason. Find new home here. With you. The words hung in the air between them, full of meaning. Mason stepped closer, taking her hands in his. When this is over, he said. If we survive. We survive. Lyra interrupted. I good scientist. You good soldier. We make good team. Mason smiled. Yes, we do. Under the stars that had brought them together, human and alien stood side by side, facing an uncertain future. But one thing was certain. They would face it together. The space monitoring station was located in a remote area of Wyoming. It looked like an ordinary research facility from the outside, but Mason knew it housed some of the most advanced tracking equipment on Earth. To avoid attention, Lyra wore a hooded jacket, sunglasses, and gloves. Her blue skin wasn't visible, but she still attracted curious glances from the few people they passed. Heather met them at a side entrance. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes widened when she saw Lyra. Mason, what have you gotten yourself into? She asked, but she let them in without waiting for an answer. She led them to a small office and locked the door behind them. You have 10 minutes. Start talking. Mason looked at Lyra, who nodded. It was time for the truth. Heather, this is Lyra. She's not from Earth. Heather's face showed disbelief, then shock as Lyra removed her sunglasses, revealing her silver eyes. 3 months ago, her ship crashed near my cabin, Mason continued. She was injured. I helped her. Now her people are coming for her, and they're not friendly. This is a joke, right? Heather said, but her voice lacked conviction. She could see Lyra clearly now. Lyra spoke, her English much improved, but still with that musical accent. Not joke. I scientist from Valkyrie. Find weapon that could kill many. Refuse to help make it. Leaders try to kill me. Crash on Earth. Mason save me. Heather sat down heavily. Aliens. Real aliens. She looked at Mason. Why didn't you report this? You know why, Mason said. They would have locked her up, studied her like a lab rat. Or worse, Heather couldn't argue with that. She had seen enough classified operations to know what happened to special cases. What do you need from me? She finally asked. Information, Mason said. We need to know if you've detected any unusual objects in orbit, particularly behind Mars. Heather gave him a sharp look. How did you know about that? It's classified. Then there is something, Mason pressed. Heather hesitated, then went to her computer. 3 weeks ago, we detected an anomaly behind Mars. The readings were inconsistent, so most people dismissed it. But I've been tracking it. She pulled up a series of images. Whatever it is, it's big and it's hiding. Conventional wisdom says it's just a glitch in our equipment. Lyra looked at the screen and made a soft hissing sound. Not glitch. Valkyrie mothership. Command vessel. How big are we talking? Mason asked. Big enough to hold 5,000 warriors, Lyra said grimly. They come soon. Days, not weeks. Heather looked pale. I need to report this. To who? Mason asked. Who would believe you? And if they did, what would they do? Start a panic? Launch missiles that wouldn't even reach the ship? We need plan, Lyra said. I have idea, but need help. Need lab. What kind of idea? Heather asked. Biological agent? Not weapon, signal. Make Valkyrie know I alive and have information that can hurt them. Make them want to talk, not fight. Heather looked at Mason. She's talking about blackmail against an alien invasion force. It might be our only chance, Mason said. If the Valkyrie attack in force, Earth isn't ready. After a long moment, Heather nodded. I know someone. Dr. Kara Perry. She runs a private research lab not far from here. She's brilliant and discreet. If anyone can help, it's her. Can we trust her? Mason asked. About as much as you can trust me, Heather replied with a small smile. That afternoon, they met Dr. Perry at her lab. She was a small woman with gray hair and bright, curious eyes. When Heather explained the situation, leaving out some details, Dr. Perry's reaction was surprising. Finally, she said, I've been waiting for this day my entire career. Unlike many humans, Dr. Perry showed no fear of Lyra, only fascination and respect. She listened carefully as Lyra explained what she needed to create the biological signal. It's doable, Dr. Perry said when Lyra finished. We have most of what you need here. The rest we can synthesize. For the next 3 days, Lyra and Dr. Perry worked together in the lab. Mason and Heather kept watch, knowing that either Valkyrie hunters or human authorities could discover them at any time. On the third night, as Mason stood guard outside the lab, Heather joined him. You're in love with her, she said. It wasn't a question. Mason didn't deny it. Crazy, right? Not as crazy as you'd think, Heather said. Love finds us in strange ways sometimes. If we survive this, I don't know what happens next, Mason admitted. Where do we go? How do we live? She's not human, Heather. People will never accept her. Some will, Heather said. The right ones. The ones that matter. Inside the lab, Lyra was making progress. The signal would be transmitted through Earth's existing satellite network. It would be coded in a way only the Valkyrie leadership would understand, containing proof that Lyra had the information about the genetic flaw in their super soldiers. This will make them hesitate, Lyra explained to Mason. Make them think before attacking. Give us chance to negotiate. On the fourth day, as they prepared to transmit the signal, alarms went off throughout the facility. We've got movement, Heather said, checking the security screens. Multiple heat signatures approaching from the north. Valkyrie? Mason asked. No, Heather said grimly. Worse, our own people. Someone talked. Through the windows, they could see black SUVs approaching. Men in dark uniforms were spreading out around the building. We need to go, Mason said. Now, Dr. Perry pointed to a back exit. There's a maintenance tunnel. It leads to the parking lot on the east side. The signal, Lyra said. Not finished sending. Leave it, Mason urged. We need to move. Lyra shook her head stubbornly. 2 more minutes. Then it reaches all satellites, please. Mason checked his watch. 2 minutes. Then we run. Heather went to the door. I'll buy you time. Tell them I was working on a project and had no idea who you really were. They won't believe that, Mason said. Maybe not, but it will confuse things long enough for you to get away. Heather gave Mason a quick hug. Good luck, soldier. Before he could stop her, she was gone. The minutes ticked by slowly. Mason could hear voices in the hallway. The signal was at 95%. 96%. 97%. Lyra, we need to go now, Mason whispered urgently. Done, Lyra said as the progress bar hit 100%. Signal sent. They slipped into the maintenance tunnel just as the lab door burst open behind them. The tunnel was dark and narrow, but they moved quickly. They could hear shouts from the lab. The authorities had found the signal equipment. When they reached the parking lot, they found it swarming with agents. Their escape route was cut off. Now what? Mason muttered. Lyra touched her wrist device. A small hologram appeared showing the layout of the area. There, she pointed to a small building across the field. Satellite control station. Can use to contact Valkyrie's ship directly. That's suicide, Mason said. We'll never make it across open ground. Lyra looked at him, her silver eyes determined. Have to try. Only chance now. Mason knew she was right. They were out of options. Stay close to me, he said, drawing his handgun. They waited until the guards were looking away, then ran. The field seemed endless, each step exposing them further. They were halfway across when the shout went up. There! Stop! Gunfire erupted behind them. Mason pushed Lyra ahead, turning to return fire. Not to kill. These were fellow Americans doing their jobs, but to slow them down. They reached the satellite station just as a bullet grazed Mason's leg. He stumbled, but Lyra caught him, dragging him inside. She sealed the door with her wrist device, fusing the lock. "That won't hold them long," Mason said, wincing as he examined his wound. "Don't need long," Lyra said. She was already working on the satellite controls, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Direct line to Valkyrie ship. Tell them I here with human allies. Tell them attack would be a mistake." Outside, they could hear the authorities preparing to breach the door. They had minutes, maybe less. Mason limped to Lyra's side. "If this doesn't work," Lyra turned to him. "It work. Have faith." She pressed a final button and the satellite dish outside began to move. A green light on the console indicated the connection was active. Lyra spoke in her native language, rapid musical sounds that Mason couldn't understand. There was a long pause. Then the console lit up with a response. Lyra's face showed surprise, then hope. "They agree to talk. Say they send shuttle. 1 hour." "We don't have an hour," Mason said as the door began to buckle under the assault from outside. Lyra touched her wrist device again. "Tell them sooner." "Tell them now." The door burst open. Men with guns poured in, surrounding them. Mason raised his hand slowly, stepping in front of Lyra protectively. "Stand down," a voice commanded. A man in a suit entered, flanked by armed guards. "I'm Agent Lewis, Homeland Security. You're both under arrest." "Sir," Mason said, keeping his voice steady. "In about 10 minutes, an alien shuttle is going to land right outside. I suggest you prepare for that instead of wasting time on us." Agent Lewis looked skeptical, but before he could respond, Heather pushed her way into the room. "He's telling the truth," she said. "Check the radar. Something's entering our atmosphere right now, and it's not one of ours." The next few minutes were chaos. Agents ran to verify Heather's claim. Mason used the distraction to check Lyra's wrist device. A small dot was indeed approaching rapidly. "This could go very badly," he whispered to Lyra. She squeezed his hand. "Or very good. We see." 1 year had passed since the night the Valkyrie ambassador arrived on Earth. 1 year of careful diplomacy, cultural exchange, and growing trust between two worlds that had never known of each other's existence. Before a damaged escape pod crashed in the Montana forest, the small government facility in Wyoming had grown into an official embassy of Valkyrie. Silver buildings with flowing, organic shapes stood beside conventional human structures. It was called Unity Base by both species, a symbol of what could be accomplished through cooperation rather than conflict. Mason walked through the gardens that surrounded the main embassy building. Earth plants grew alongside specimens from the Valkyrie homeworld, blue ferns that moved slightly even without wind, and tall silver flowers that chimed softly when touched. The garden was Lyra's project, a living symbol of how different life forms could thrive together. He found her kneeling beside a new planting, her blue hands gently patting soil around the roots. She looked up as he approached, her silver eyes brightening. "The sunrise lilies taking root," she said, her English now nearly perfect after a year of practice. "They grow well in earth soil," Mason smiled. "Just like you." Lyra stood brushing dirt from her hands. She wore a simple outfit that blended Valkyrie and human styles. Practical pants and boots with a flowing top, made of the shimmering fabric her people preferred. Around her neck was the small piece of metal from her crashed ship that Mason had saved. He had made it into a pendant for her, a reminder of how their story began. "Ambassador Trell wants to see us," Mason said. "He says it's important." They walked together toward the main building. Many people, both human and Valkyrie, nodded respectfully as they passed. Mason and Lyra had become well-known figures, the human soldier and the alien scientist whose unlikely bond had paved the way for peace between their worlds. The past year had been challenging. After the initial contact, weeks of tense negotiations followed. Some humans feared the advanced technology of the Valkyrie. Some Valkyrie looked down on humans as primitive. But gradually understanding grew. Lyra's scientific knowledge had been crucial. She helped humans understand Valkyrie biology and technology, while learning everything she could about Earth. Mason had become a liaison between the military forces of both worlds, teaching humans about Valkyrie tactics and helping the Valkyrie understand human concerns. They found Ambassador Trell in his office. The tall Valkyrie stood looking out a window at the mountains beyond the base. He turned as they entered, his deep blue face solemn. "Mason, Lyra, thank you for coming." His English had improved greatly, though he still spoke with the musical accent all Valkyries shared. I have news from the Council. The Valkyrie High Council was the ruling body of their civilization. Since the Civil War had ended, the Peace faction had controlled the Council, but politics among the Valkyrie were still complex. The Council has made a decision about Earth, Trell continued. They have voted to offer full alliance status. Not just diplomatic relations, but true partnership, sharing of technology, cultural exchange, mutual defense. Mason felt a surge of pride. This was what they had been working toward for months. That's wonderful news, he said. There is more, Trell said, his expression softening. The Council specifically mentioned you two. Your relationship has become a symbol to both our peoples. They wish to formally recognize it. Lyra's hand found Mason's. Recognize how? They propose a bonding ceremony. What humans might call a wedding. The first official union between our species. It would be a powerful symbol of our new alliance. Mason looked at Lyra in surprise. They had grown closer over the past year, their friendship deepening into something more. They had not hidden their feelings, but neither had they made them public in an official way. This would be a political gesture, Trell added, seeing their reaction. But it need not be only that. The Council has observed your bond. They believe it is genuine, as do I. After Trell left them to discuss the proposal privately, Mason and Lyra walked to their favorite spot, a small hill overlooking the base. The first stars were appearing in the evening sky. A wedding, Mason said finally. That's not something I ever expected. Lyra looked up at the stars. On Valkyrie, bonding is sacred thing. Not done for politics. On Earth too, Mason agreed. At least it shouldn't be. They were quiet for a moment, watching as more stars appeared. Somewhere up there was Lyra's home star and the planet she had left behind. Do you miss it? Mason asked softly. Your home? Sometimes, Lyra admitted. Miss friends, familiar places? But Valkyrie changed now. Civil War left scars. Many died. She turned to look at him. Found new home here. With you. Mason took her hands in his. They were so different. His tan and calloused, hers blue and smooth with delicate webbing between the fingers. Yet they fit together perfectly. I love you, he said simply. I have for a long time. If you want to do this bonding ceremony, I'd be honored. But not as a political symbol. Because it's what we both want. Lyra's silver eyes shimmered with emotion. I love you too, Mason. Never thought possible, human and Valkyrie. But heart knows what science cannot explain. Their decision made, preparations for the ceremony began. It would be held in 3 months' time to coincide with the signing of the official alliance treaty. Both human and Valkyrie traditions would be honored. Not everyone approved. Some humans still feared the Valkyrie, seeing them as a threat despite all evidence to the contrary. Some Valkyrie believed their people should remain separate, preserving what they saw as the purity of their species. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Mason received a disturbing message from Heather, who now worked full-time at Unity Base. We've picked up chatter from a human extremist group, she told him in a private meeting. They're calling themselves Earth First. They see the alliance as a surrender, and they're particularly focused on you and Lyra. They see your relationship as unnatural. Mason had expected resistance, but direct threats were more serious. Have you identified any of them? Not yet. But security is being increased for the ceremony. Director West is personally overseeing it. Director West had become one of their strongest allies. Her pragmatic approach to the Valkyrie situation had helped smooth many diplomatic hurdles. Don't tell Lyra, Mason said. Not yet. Let me look into it first. But Lyra had her own sources of information. That evening she confronted him. Why you not tell me about threats? She asked, her eyes troubled. Mason sighed. I didn't want you to worry. Heather just told me today. We face things together, Lyra reminded him. Always, no secrets. She was right, of course. From the beginning, their strength had been in facing challenges side by side. I'm sorry, Mason said. Old habits. I still want to protect you even though I know you can protect yourself. Lyra's expression softened. Understand. But remember, we stronger together than apart. As the day of the ceremony approached, security tightened around Unity Base. Guests began to arrive from both Earth and the Valkyrie ships in orbit. It would be the largest gathering of the two species since first contact. The night before the ceremony, Mason couldn't sleep. He walked outside, looking up at the stars. So much had changed in a year. His life had taken a turn he could never have imagined when he first saw that falling light in the sky. A soft sound made him turn. Lyra was there watching him. "Bad dreams?" she asked. "No dreams at all," Mason said. "Just thinking about everything that's brought us here." Lyra joined him, her presence comforting in the cool night air. "Remember night we meet? I afraid. Hurt. Think I die on strange world. And I thought I was just helping an injured stranger," Mason said with a smile. "I had no idea you'd change my life. Change the whole world. We changed together," Lyra said, echoing words she had spoken once before. The ceremony site was on a plateau overlooking Unity Base. Chairs were arranged in a circle, with no front or back, a Valkyrie tradition symbolizing equality. Flowers from both worlds decorated the space. A mixture of human and Valkyrie music played softly as guests arrived. Mason stood with his groomsmen, his old army buddies who had supported him through everything. He wore his dress uniform with a sash of Valkyrie design across his chest. When Lyra appeared, a hush fell over the gathering. She wore a gown that seemed to flow like water, shifting colors in the sunlight, silvers, blues, and subtle purples. Her blue skin glowed with health and her silver eyes shone with happiness. The ceremony combined traditions from both worlds. They spoke vows in both English and the Valkyrie language. They exchanged rings in the human tradition and shared a cup of special water in the Valkyrie way. Ambassador Trell spoke of bridges between worlds and the courage it takes to cross them. Director West spoke of new beginnings and the strength found in diversity. When it was time for Mason and Lyra to speak their personal vows, Mason took her hands in his. "A year ago, I found you in the darkness, injured and alone. I didn't know then that in helping you I was finding my own way home. You've shown me a universe larger than I ever imagined. But what matters most is the world we've created together. I promise to stand by you, to face whatever comes next at your side, to love you across any distance through any challenge."